Welcome to the Internship Showcase. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Quantitative Analysis and Data Science panels. I'm Kristen Stanton, and I am a career consultant in the CPDC. I work specifically with Dietrich College students, and I'm so happy to see you all here today. Doug, do you want to introduce yourself quickly too?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Doug Stouch, and I am the Assistant Director for Experiential Learning at the CPDC. I work with a lot of first and second year students on early engagement programming, and I am the coordinator of the Internship Showcase. So glad to be here, and I'm running the slides. Back to you, Kristen.
All right, great, thanks. So Doug and I'm sure all of you are really excited to hear from our talented students today who have been so kind as to volunteer their time to talk to us about their summer internship experiences. And so before we chat with our panelists, I just briefly want to review the purpose of our internship showcase. So the purpose is really twofold. One, we want to give you an opportunity to explore various job functions, industries, and career opportunities. But we also want you to learn how to get an internship in your area of interest, from submitting your application to actually getting the offer. And so today's panelists were selected and invited by the CPDC to share their internship experiences and also their efforts and strategies for obtaining them. Okay, so let's introduce our panelists. So joining us today, we have Kunal Joshi. Kunal is a computational biology major, and he was a computational genomics intern at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. We also have Asad Sheikh, who is a statistics and machine learning major and was a data science intern at Flatiron Health. Also here today is Zachery Leventhal, who is an econ major and was an economic research intern at the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. Also here is Leandro Lopez. Leandro is a statistics and machine learning major, and he interned as a quantitative analyst at StockSnips. Also here is Jing-Chun Kwan. Jing-Chun is a computational finance major and was a sales and trading summer analyst at Bank of America. And then lastly, we have Andrew Furlong. Andrew is also a statistics and machine learning major and interned as a summer associate with the Institute for Defense Analyses. Okay, so just real quick in terms of the structure for today's session, we're gonna have each panelist present for about 3 to 5 minutes, and we will then have a Q&A once all of the presentations have been completed. So feel free to ask your questions at any time, but if you do have a question, please go ahead and put it in the chat so that Doug or I can address it after all the panelists are finished. Also, audience members, please feel free to turn your cameras off and definitely make sure that your mics are muted during the presentations. And again, if you have questions, just go ahead and throw them in the chat or save them until the end. Okay, so without further ado, Asad, I will let you take it from here.
Awesome, thank you so much. So hi, everyone. Like Kristen said earlier, I'm Asad Sheikh. Over the summer, I was a data science intern at Flatiron Health. So just to start off with a little bit about me, I'm a senior. I'm currently majoring in statistics and machine learning with an additional major in HCI. Some of my interests, I guess, outside of data science would be like art, museums, cold brew, love all those things. But the more important part is my summer. So I was working for Flatiron Health, which is a company based in New York City. And their mission statement is to improve the lives by learning from the experience of every cancer patient, which I thought was really interesting and kind of one of the initial factors that kind of drew me in. So I spent a lot of my summer learning about cancer data and doing a lot of cool, interesting data science problems with it. Next slide. Cool. So to start off with just kind of an overview for the application process, I actually heard about the position from a friend who interviewed there and then also told me that she thought I would really like it. So that's kind of how I heard about it. And so for the first application, I just applied on the company website. They just needed my resume, a cover letter, and they had a quick short answer question. And the question was why I thought I would be a good fit at Flatiron. After the first application, they then reached out to me to do a take-home assessment. So they gave me a data set and then told me I could use whatever language I wanted to kind of analyze that data set. Basically, they gave me a bunch of guiding questions and I just had to go through and kind of like answer them and then quickly like discuss it. I ended up doing that in like Jupyter Notebook and then just kind of sent that back to them. After that, I then had 2 rounds of interviews. And so these interviews were a mix of product or technical interviews. So for like the technical part, what Flatiron does is it was kind of like a whiteboarding exercise where they present you kind of with a data problem. And I was just basically kind of thinking of like, how would I store the data if I, had full control over that? And then after that, like if they needed specific information, how would I like query that data using SQL or so on and so forth? And then for like the more like product-based interviews, it was a lot of like product thinking exercises, and also like behavioral questions on like past projects I'd worked on that involved product. So yeah, that's kind of an overview of the application process and what that looked like for me. Next slide. Cool. So once I got to Flatiron, what did I actually do? So my project kind of had these 2 main phases to it. So the first part was kind of understanding billing data. So Flatiron has access to a lot of different patient data. They have things on like drug episodes, like when patients are taking drugs. They have access to like the demographic information. But one data source they hadn't really leveraged in the past was kind of like this billing data or a summary of the charges that a doctor inputs into the system that Flatiron had access to. So what I kind of started off doing was looking at that billing data and seeing how can we verify other data sources at Flatiron. So for example, Flatiron has a table that has like a line for every time a patient takes a drug. And so one thing we could use billing data for was, can we use billing data, to confirm that the patient was actually on those drugs? Because if they were charged for it, there's a good chance that they actually were taking it at that time. And so I was able to kind of verify a lot of the different therapies that patients were on and see whether or not, the data that Flatiron was using was accurate by using billing data as kind of this layer of verification. And then the other part of my internship was understanding disease progression events and kind of identifying them using text data. So a lot of data that Flatiron also has is not really like in a tabular form, it's like in the form of doctor's notes. So a lot of text data. And so usually for a lot of specific pieces of information, they have to get in these people they call abstractors, which are basically people who have like relevant medical experience, who go in and read the chart themselves and manually say, yes, like this patient was on like this drug or other kind of like information that Flatiron is looking for. So one of my other projects, kind of a continuation of the first one, was when we know a patient is on a specific regimen of drugs, can we see that within the time period they were on those drugs, did their disease progress or not? And typically this is something that's done manually. So I was able to build kind of like a machine learning pipeline that basically read in all of the text data, vectorized it, and then kind of ran this ML model that was then able to extract and identify whether or not a patient had a progression event during a certain range of time. And then the last project I worked on was synthetic data generation, which was more of an exploratory project in our company's hackathon. But we were looking specifically to see, are we able to create de-identified data sets that mimic the statistical properties and relations of the variables in the original data and can still be used well enough for our analyses? Because a big thing that we're seeing, especially in like the EU, is that there's greater privacy laws about patient data. And so a lot of work that Flatiron is doing revolves around patient data. So we're trying to see if there's a way to kind of almost completely de-identify it so that it's as absolutely secured as possible. But some of the technical skills that I worked on, I used a lot of coding in R, SQL, and Python. And then specifically, kind of like higher level, I worked a lot in machine learning and natural language processing. There were also a lot of soft skills that I feel like I developed at my time at Flatiron, specifically presentation skills. I was regularly communicating and giving presentations on my progress, and then ended the internship kind of with like this big presentation that I had to give, I think, like 3 times. And then I also curated a really nice list of coffee chat questions. I took a lot of time to meet as many people as I could at Flatiron. Definitely recommend you doing that as well in any internship. And then some of the accomplishments at Flatiron, the ML model I talked about to identify disease progression events was actually really successful, and generated a lot of interest in the company. And specifically for billing data, that's always been a conversation at Flatiron, whether they should invest in their billing data to kind of expand it and make sure that it's like diverse enough in capturing everything. And so I think that conversation also has been continuing since my time there. Next slide. Cool. And so just to wrap it up, a little bit of a reflection. Some of the biggest takeaways I took at Flatiron was specifically applied ML knowledge. I felt like a lot of my courses at CMU taught me a lot about the basics of ML, but I didn't get as much of a chance to apply it. And like specifically in the health tech setting, I think was really interesting. I also realized the importance of user research. Kind of bringing in my HCI background, I use that a lot to kind of get an understanding of like the initial domain space I was working in with billing data, seeing what has the company previously done, if anything, with billing data, just to get an idea of what had already been tried. And then another really big takeaway was the importance of setting goals and being conscious of your growth. I think one of the things I did that set myself up for success and worked the best at Flatiron was I kind of at the start wrote down 3 bullets that I said I wanted to put on my resume. Like if I had the 3 bullets that I would put on my LinkedIn profile, my resume, what did I want them to be? And I kind of came up with them at the start of that internship and communicated that with my manager. And we worked to over the period of my internship so that at the end, I was actually able to put all 3 onto my resume. And then another piece of advice, I think, one thing I didn't get to do as much of that I really would have liked to was meeting with people who didn't do the same job as me. I met a lot of data scientists at Flatiron, but I didn't get to meet as many people outside. I met like a couple, but I would have liked to meet more. And then I think lastly, just wrapping up with some advice, as you're looking for internships, I think it's important to be conscious if there is a good cultural fit, and then also using the fact that you are an intern to meet with all kinds of people, because I met so many cool and amazing people at Flatiron and just learned so much. But yeah, I think that's pretty much a summary of my time at Flatiron. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions at the end.
Awesome. Thanks, Asad. I love that idea of coming up with your bullet points before the internship. I think that's brilliant. And I haven't heard of anyone doing that, but I feel like I'll use that advice with other students. All right, so next up, we have Jing Chun.
Yeah, hello. My name is Jing Chun, and I was a sales and trading summer analyst this past summer at Bank of America. Just a little about me, I study computational finance with a dual degree in statistics and machine learning. And on campus, I am involved with the Quant Club and TSF, as well as the cultural org, ARCC. And at Bank of America, I was a part of the global markets division in the New York City office. And the program that I applied to was specifically a sophomore rotational program in sales and trading. So it was this 10-week virtual internship, unfortunately, but it consisted of 3 weeks of training, which I think is pretty long compared to most internships. And then we had 2 rotations that were about 3.5 weeks each, which allowed us to really experience 2 different teams and explore kind of both the equities and the fixed side if you wanted, which are like 2 different groups in trading. So something that I thought was really neat was that the mentorship program and the cohort groups that we had, everyone got assigned to a junior and a senior mentor. And I actually had a 3rd mentor from this women's network that I joined. So yeah, definitely lots of mentorship opportunities. The senior mentor is someone who is like a VP or higher. So you can ask them about their career progression or ask them for recommendations on who to network with. Since they're pretty senior, they probably know a lot of people at the bank. And for the junior mentor, they're usually like analysts or associate who just started just like you, like they were just in your shoes a couple years ago. So I think you can be slightly more casual and ask about like best practices on your team. I know I was asking about like when should I start logging on in the morning and stuff like that. And then also during the program, we had just a lot of like learning opportunities that I really appreciated. We were sent these like calendar invites for different teach-ins and info sessions. And even though we were virtual, we got to do this volunteering project with the Smithsonian. And BOA also invited like these fitness coaches to give us yoga sessions and stuff, which I thought was like super cool to kind of get that whole intern experience despite being virtual. Next slide, please. And banks, as many of you guys might know, have a notoriously like accelerated recruiting timeline. It's getting like earlier and earlier every single year. So since I've heard about that from upperclassmen and from coming to like different events like these events, like CPDC events, I started submitting my apps like pretty early during my freshman summer. So for most of the banks, you kind of just apply directly on their website with your resume. And in early September, when school started, I did go to the TOC and I was able to speak with the recruiter for Bank of America. I'm not sure if this helped my application or anything, but I mean, I just asked her like a couple of genuine questions that I had about the process. And maybe a week after that, I did the hire view, which is like this video interview where you record yourself on like a couple of questions. And a week after that, I was contacted about the Super Day, which is 3 back-to-back interviews with usually like directors or managing directors, where they'll ask like this good mix of behaviorals and markets and basic technical questions. But it was nothing in depth, like nothing too in depth, because they do recognize that like we were just sophomores, like we had only just completed our first years of college, so we don't have that much experience. And I think the big tip that I have for the application process is to really reach out to upperclassmen who have had experience recruiting for or interning in the industry that you're hoping to get into. I think that sometimes this can be even more helpful than networking with the people who are already in the industry, because like they're still students and they can be more genuine and more candid with you about their experiences. So I was able to talk to people in the orgs I was involved in who have interned at BOA before. And not only did they help me clarify parts of the application process, but they also gave me like, I think generally just like a better understanding of the firm, and kind of like making the job sound a little bit more human than just like the description that they had on the job application. So I was able to like use some of what they told me in my Super Day interview, which I thought was really cool. When they asked me like, oh, why Bank of America? I was able to give a little bit more of like a unique answer, like a more concrete answer, specifically based on what they told me and their experiences. Next slide. And yeah, lastly, just to reflect on my experience, I think I was really grateful that it was a rotational program. If it wasn't for COVID, we would usually have 3 rotations actually, but even with just 2, I was able to get a feel for how different the 2 teams can be. Even though they're both in like the same company and the same division and everything, they were like quite different. For my 2 different desks, my first desk was a lot more presentation and Excel heavy, while my second desk was pretty much all coding, all data analysis, and like very heavy on the technical skills. So I think your experience will really depend on the desk and the product that it trades. And I also realized like the importance of communication and networking, because interns don't have the license to trade. We pretty much can't do anything to like help the business. So besides like the intern project that you get, you were just supposed to fill your calendar with networking calls with people both on your desk and outside your desk, and also with your assigned mentors, of course. So yeah, I think I didn't expect there to be so much like communication and networking, which was like really, really important in the internship. And lastly, for my advice, I think my advice to anyone who might be interested in these opportunities is to like follow the markets every day, because I think this is just as important as your technical skills and communication skills. And something that I struggled with a bit in the beginning was with using Bloomberg. I did not know that this was how everyone like communicated with each other. If I had a question for my manager, I would use the chat feature on Bloomberg, because a lot of traders would prefer that over like a formal email. So yeah, at CMU, I believe that we have a terminal in both Tepper and in Sorel. So I think getting familiar with some of the functions before an internship would be good. And I think lastly, the most important tip that I have is to apply early. I know you probably hear this a lot, but I think it's really, really important. Even though on the website, like the application deadline might be in like November or December, they definitely interview people and give offers out in waves. So I think it really helps to be in one of those earlier waves. And most of the spots I think would be filled long before the apps are closed. So yeah, I think just make sure to prepare really early, reach out to upperclassmen early and apply early. So yeah, I would love to answer any questions later in the Q&A, or you can reach out to me after this panel. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome, thank you so much. And just for those of you who are joining a little later, we are hoping to have a Q&A at the end of the presentations, but I'm not sure we'll have time for many questions. So as Jing-Chun said, if you have questions for her or any of the other panelists, you may want to direct message them in addition to just putting them in the chat in case we don't have time for that at the end. Okay, so moving along, Kunal, you're up next.
Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Kunal. So I'm a third year in SES, and I study computational biology, machine learning, and design. At Pittsburgh, I am actually involved in psychology research. I'm a TA for 15 to 51. And outside of schoolwork, I'm a Starbucks barista in Shadyside. Feel free to visit me whenever. I'll give you some free coffee. And last summer, I interned at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. So they're a pharmaceutical company that makes drugs and medicines. But they're best known for making the COVID-19 monoclonal antibodies that you may or may not have heard about in the news. But more specifically, I actually work in the genetics research wing of Regeneron, which is like the super fast growing part of the company. In fact, I think they hired so many people over the pandemic that they don't have space on their campus to fit them. So it's pretty fast growing and they're investing a lot more money in that area. Next slide, please. So at Regeneron, I basically had two kind of separate duties, or I guess I could describe my role in doing two separate things. First, for a set of team responsibility. So I was on a particular team that had a designated task, and I had to contribute to a lot of that. And the second, I had my own independent project where I could go and explore this specific topic, which for like in genetics and machine learning, that would contribute to kind of a bigger scheme or bigger project that was going on in the genetics center. So my team was called computational biology, interestingly, and our team's job was to read some of the latest papers in statistical genetics, machine learning, computational genomics, and we would try to re-engineer a lot of these methods on our own in-house data and sometimes improve on their methods, iterate on them, find bugs. You'll find that a lot of research code is pretty annoying to work with. So I guess that's a skill that you learn. But what was super cool about my team responsibilities is when I had to read all these super cool cutting edge papers in the space, I really had to use a lot of the technical knowledge that I learned from my CMU classes. So biochemistry, genetics, ML, and math, all of them to understand some of these super interdisciplinary papers that are coming out in the field. But my specific project, so that was like my team responsibility, but my specific project was developing several ML models that detect whether a certain class of genetic variants can lead to disease or like a phenotypic disease that you might see. The great part about this project is I was able to work cross-functionally with biologists and statisticians to kind of build a solution to this problem. And what was cool is my role, although it had the major part was data science and quantitative analysis, there was a software engineering component where I kind of took some of the results from my model and made them interpretable for the biologists downstream that use the genetic center's data to develop their drugs. Next slide, please. So one super quick thing that I want to highlight for people who are interested in doing research in industry is kind of comparing the industry research that I did to academic research. So I do academic research here at CMU and I did industry research at RGC. And it's interesting to kind of compare the two to see what are the pros and cons of each. So I feel like at my academic research here at CMU, I'm really free to explore whatever interest that I want to. My lab is like, oh, you want to start this project in this area? Sure, we can go down that route and we can see what happens. The issue is it's kind of hard to secure funding and grants and getting paid for the work that you do. So that's kind of like a big roadblock that can help or kind of hinder the progress of research. But at RGC, what was interesting is a lot of the projects that I was focusing on were I was kind of told what projects I needed to do that kind of contributed to whatever greater thing was going on in the company. So basically I was told, okay, you need to work on these sets of things and work with these sets of papers. But what was interesting is whatever money or funding that I needed to get my job done, they wrote a blank check. They're like, oh, I need money or I need some funding to get this done. No worries, we can give you the cloud compute to do that, or we can give you the resources you need to do that. And they also pay you for your work. So that was kind of some of the pros and cons of academic versus industry research. And when you're deciding which one to do, feel free to kind of use and debate those pros and cons as well. Next slide, please. And finally, I just want to talk a little bit about the recruiting process at Regeneron specifically and some more general tips and advice for people who want to apply to the biotech and pharma space and do data science and quantitative work there. So at Regeneron, the first thing was a recorded higher review interview that Jing Chun was talking about before. I personally don't understand how it kind of fits into the whole process. All the CMU students that I know of pass this part, so I wouldn't stress out too much about the higher review. Then afterwards, you have 2 virtual interviews. One was like a behavioral interview with the hiring manager or the team that they think that you would fit best on. And then the second is like a more technical data science interview with that same hiring manager and with maybe some additional people on the team. Most of the interview was actually data science and machine learning related. There wasn't actually too much biology. And how a lot of these internship programs work in the bio and pharma space is you kind of learn the biology on the job. And it's a major plus to kind of have that knowledge from your CMU classes, but a lot of the major biology you also learn there. So in terms of assessment, they don't actually assess you on the biology. It's more the technical data science stuff. And in terms of tips and advice, Regeneron and a bunch of other pharma and biotech companies recruit at CMU. The computational biology department in SCS specifically has a lot of connections and sends people to basically any biotech or pharma company you can think of, all the way from DeepMind to maybe your biotech startup. So definitely reach out to people like me or people in the CBD department, because they can help you get in contact with the recruiter or an alum that works there who can help you through the recruiting process. So highly recommend using your connections within CMU to kind of get your first step through the door. Another major thing that a lot of people like, at least in the bio and pharma space, is during your interviews, make sure you highlight your computational and mathematical experience from a strong CS school. So the fact that you have to take courses like concepts, as a StatML major, or 110 and 112 are really, really big pluses, because a lot of biologists don't have too much of that experience. They have maybe more wet lab experience. So highlighting this computational and mathematical experience and practice that you've had at CMU makes you really stand out from the crowd of like PhD biology majors who may not actually have that coding and math experience. And lastly, RGC and a lot of pharma companies really want to build these interdisciplinary cross-functional teams for future research. So I highly recommend mentioning your commitment to this in any interview in this space, because that's kind of where the industry is moving. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much, Kunal. Thanks for Regeneron for those monoclonal antibodies. And next up, we have Zachery.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Zachery Leventhal. I'm an econ math sciences major. I'm from Maryland, outside of DC. My personal sort of like aspiration, which I think could help sort of color my sharing about my experience, is that I want to go on to pursue a PhD in economics. So, one of the considerations I had when I was looking around last summer was, do I want to go into an internship versus, do I just want to do research? And, fortunately, there's a lot of places where you can sort of do both. And so a really great place I ended up at was the Federal Reserve Board of Governors in DC. I got to help, they have hundreds of economists who work at the Fed doing research. And I was able to help within a division, within a section within the division, helping to work on different projects there involving financial analysis and research that pertains to finance and the economy. There are also a lot of great opportunities for networking, meeting others that I'll get into later on. But for now, next slide. Thank you. Yeah, so just starting off with the getting to the Fed process. I was when I was thinking about what exactly I wanted to apply to. As I said, balancing doing research and having an internship. So, what I honestly had in mind at the beginning of last fall was, okay, probably I'll try to apply to a think tank, something like that, I'm interested in policy, I'm interested in doing economics. And what I found out was, one, a lot of think tanks and places like that have, I guess, relatively late applications processes. A lot of them don't even post their offerings until the beginning of the same year, where as the summer that they'd be offering it. So not until, when I was looking in fall 2020, stuff wasn't even up yet until like January 2021. However, one thing that was up, before all of that was the Federal Reserve. So it was relatively early relative to that, but not too early. I ended up, I think, applying and submitting by the beginning of November. I found out a lot of information on the website. I sort of looked up where to go for interning. They had a portal that honestly, it was a little inconvenient to use, but I used it. I had to ask around, get a recommendation or two. I submitted everything. I heard back in December, they wanted an interview. The way that process works is that the different economists who are in charge of different projects at the Fed, they look through the resumes themselves, they figure out, okay, these people may be interesting, and then they go and they interview you themselves, the people who are like working on the project. So that was a really cool experience. I wasn't just talking with a hiring manager, nothing against hiring managers, but I was talking with, the person who I would be working with on the project. And fortunately, after that process, I got in. There wasn't any additional coding interview or anything like that. It was relatively clean and convenient, which is really nice. And I received the offer and accepted it in around late December, early January. All right, next slide. So in terms of like what I actually was doing once I got to the Fed in the summer, I was focusing on, we were looking at mutual fund data, and in particular, the projects or the research that was being done, they wanted to use data on a particular aspect of mutual funds. And there are multiple data sets out there that they wanted to sort of get a good analysis of, okay, which one's actually better to use here, which one's not. There's this government source and a private source. And so what I was looking at was, first, I was doing the literature review. I was like, okay, I personally need to get a better sense of the history of these data sets, the context, to figure out and help color once I actually look and go into the data and look at that. So I spent a few weeks at the beginning there, looking at papers online that use these different data sets, for the government source, looking through government documents, seeing what I could find out about just other information there, and looking at other data sets there to just get a good sense of what to do. And part of that there was figuring out, like, talking with my supervisor, also the person who interviewed me. It was sort of a sense of, okay, she wants me to do this, she has this broad goal for me, and what can I do best? Should I hop right into analyzing this data, or should I do a lit review? So I had a good amount of discretion there, which was something I really appreciated. After doing that lit review, establishing a bit of a timeline that helped out, I actually was able to uncover some like interesting details there. Then I turned to like the actual data analysis. These were really large data sets, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of rows of data. It was my first time really actually working with big data. As you can imagine, sitting there a good amount of the time, waiting for things to run, figuring out how to make things run more efficiently. I was working in Stata, which was a new language. And so like, there was nothing against that. There was nothing against like, oh, like you should have known Stata when you came. They were prepared to help me learn and prepared to give me the time to figure out, this new programming language. Also working a lot in Excel for, smaller, looking at individual funds, comparing them side by side that way. And so what I got out of it, it was a great learning experience. Being part of a project, doing data analysis with big data was a little new for me. And also, really diving into a literature review was also new for me. So I got a lot of learning that, pertained really well to my research experience, or like potential research experience I would want to, accumulate down the line. I was able to get a lot of professional development. The Fed was really great with, just always offering different, different sessions on, okay, here's a resume review, here's how to like efficiently use LinkedIn. Here's how to here's a grad school panel, here's a former intern panel. They had a lot of different, here's like personal finance. They had a lot of different really great opportunities there. They were really big, even though I was the only intern within my section, within my division. There are interns all across the Fed that we were able to link up with. I was able to meet with people in DC because I was in the area, even though my internship was virtual that summer. So I was able to make friends from that. I was able to connect with people, and it was encouraged that we messaged, like people in the Fed who we wanted to talk to. So I had a couple of those conversations, which was really great. And I as great as that was, I feel like, I could have even made more of my opportunity and had done that more. All right, next slide. And so that's really like the gist of what I was doing, on a weekly basis. There was a good amount of, talking back and forth with my supervisor. I was really focusing on that project though, and I was really happy with how that came along. At the end, I had a presentation that I gave to our section as well as to the other interns. And so I was really happy with how the project turned out. Sort of as a bit of an epilogue to sort of sets of things here. The first thing is, okay, I said at the beginning of me talking, I want to go into a PhD. So sort of what are the next steps, sort of as I see them from this Fed internship. I was figuring out what to do this summer again. I reapplied to the Fed. And so I'll be going back and working on a different project. And, with that and with other things I've done, currently this year, I'm doing all of this in preparation to apply for a PhD or for predoctoral programs in the fall. And then lastly, some helpful tips that I learned about applying, some insights I got about it. Here's 5 that are here. Number 1, we had to do a cover letter. A cover letter, that was something that was sort of new to me. I didn't really know what people were looking for, and sort of what I settled on and what I think what worked was to sort of go and emphasize, 2 to 3 things that, these are what they're asking for. This is exactly how I achieve it, and being really explicit about that, and sort of going on and elaborating with like the experiences that I've had that sort of underscore how I have this quality that they're looking for. And so my recommendation for that is really it's worthwhile being explicit. They don't want to read like a college application essay. They want to see and have a good sense of like what can you do and what can you do to help them. Coding and research for all of these jobs, there's all of them involve a lot of quantitative analysis. And so even if they don't ask for it explicitly, you should be prepared to be able to speak to that aspect of your experience. When it comes to interviews, interviews can be a really scary thing. Some people aren't as comfortable talking with an interviewer. And I think really what's important to remember there is that, if they didn't want to, if they didn't think you would be good for the job, they wouldn't have interviewed you to begin with. So don't be scared by the fact that this is another round of screening. I think it's good to show the interviewer that, you're confident in your own abilities and you're excited that you have this opportunity to speak with them. Quality over quantity, that's a big one. That's why the image is there. I think that, you want to apply, it's good to apply to many things. It's good to be, realistic and manage your expectations when it comes to everything. But at the same time, you want to make sure you're always putting your best foot forward. So I don't think it's a good strategy, in my opinion, to sort of put together a resume and sort of, as a preliminary test, I'm going to apply everywhere with this resume without, giving it a bunch of good run-throughs and stuff. The CPDC was really helpful to me. I met with them a bunch before I even applied anywhere. And I think, just taking that time to really refine everything as best as you can before you start to send it out is a really important thing to do. And lastly, connections are, they really do matter. Luck can be a factor. It turned out that the person who interviewed me was a CMU PhD economics alum. And so, sometimes it comes down to those lucky breaks. And it's important to, connect with people and network people so that you sort of maximize your luck there. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Great. Again, thank you so much for that comprehensive overview, Zachary. And again, some more really great career advice and job search advice. And then last, but definitely not least, we have Andrew.
Thanks. Hi, so my name's Andrew. I'm a senior in statistics and machine learning at CMU with a minor in mathematical sciences. So far, my research interests have been in data science, public policy, and political economics. And I participated in a 10-week summer associate program at the Institute for Defense Analyses. Next slide. So the interview process was pretty simple. There was an initial interview with the hiring manager, who sent me over to the division manager for an hour-long interview, just discussing my background and what sort of qualifications I brought to the table. After that, I met with the potential summer mentors I would have over the summer of 2021, who discussed my quantitative skills and as well as any qualitative things that I might bring to the table that weren't reflected in my resume or background. After that, it was a 10-week hybrid internship, but I was in the area. It's in DC, so I was in the area, so I went into the office most days, and I was assigned to a group studying outcomes for lower back pain, to study how various factors such as treatments, care settings, and care settings could identify problematic trends and constructed statistical models to predict the outcomes and costs if we apply different treatments. After that, I published the findings and my policy recommendations for a DoD study. So then, So yeah, more about the internship position. It's the Institute for Defense Analyses is a federally funded research center. So they get a lot of grant money from the federal government, in particular, mostly the Department of Defense, to conduct specific studies kind of relating to various policy questions. So my team was studying lower back pain because that is a big cost area for the Department of Defense and their health team. But there's a lot of different varied work that I could have participated in over the summer. So over the course of the internship, I was assigned a senior mentor who was a research group leader who kind of provided me with some tips for how to go about my work, and as well as tips for what I should do after graduation if I was interested in this field. Then as well as that, there were some meet and greets with management and guest speakers, and I had to compile all of my research into a final presentation for my entire division, which is a good skill to know how to do. There's no background knowledge aside from data science, but there was a very steep learning curve. The only biology class I've taken was freshman bio in high school, and I was thrown into a project that was working entirely with healthcare data. So there's a steep learning curve in terms of figuring out all of the different jargon and technical things that a statistician just doesn't really know from the classroom. But as a stats major, that's pretty standard, honestly, to have to learn a lot about any project at the beginning. As I said, there's various project topics that are assigned to fit intern strengths. I was assigned to one that was pretty heavy on the quantitative analysis and the data science side, but there was anything from psychology students to even a few computer scientists there as well. Another note is that security clearance is required for this position, which is just kind of a glorified background check, but it is kind of a pain to get one. So yeah, that is all.
All right, now I'll wrap us up. Thank you, Kristen, for running us through, and thank you so much to our panelists for taking the time to present with us today. I know we went a little bit over time. Thank you to the participants that stuck around and listened to everything. So yeah, this was a very, very thorough set of presentations. We have recorded it, and these will be on our webpage in the future within the next 2 weeks. So this is the second round of panels. We also have our business panel and our computer software and web development panel starting at 5 o'clock. And so those are individual Zoom links that are also on the Handshake event posting, as well as in the email that you all received today. But again, as the coordinator, I would like to thank our panelists, our audience for being here, and Kristen, thank you so much for running this meeting with us. So if you have any questions for the panelists, make sure to reach out to them. Otherwise, I will see you all at the next panel. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Doug. Great presentation. Bye, everyone.